Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and today is Friday, July 15th. We're welcoming everybody back from the All-Star break today. Got a big 14-game slate to look at for tonight, so we're going to break it down. As always, in the Benny's Back section, what we're going to do is we're going to look at each pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats are going to profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top with the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. Michael Pineda is on the mound for the Yankees, and he's a guy that's been up and down. Had a horrible first couple starts to the year, and then came back and followed it by some dominant starts. Now, he's not somebody who goes deep into the games. He's only been going about 6 innings in most of his recent starts. Righties and lefties are both hitting about 270 against him. He does have a lot of Ks, but he also has been giving up some hits. Not really a ton of walks, but definitely has had some games where he's given up 8 or 9 hits. And really got knocked around a little bit. A couple of the guys that I'm really looking at on the Boston team. I like David Ortiz a lot. 441 WOBA, 350 ISO against right-handed pitching. So he's obviously in play. He's always a good person to look at in those situations. Mookie Betts is another guy I'm looking at. 360 WOBA, 203 ISO. He's 5 of 17 lifetime against Pineda with 2 home runs. So he's had some success against them. Xander Bogaerts has actually had some success against them too, 5 of 18 as well for Bogaerts. So those are the 3 guys I'm looking at up there towards the top of that Red Sox order. The Yankees are getting a chance to go up against Eduardo Rodriguez, and in 2016, he has been horrendous. He's given up 29 runs in 29 innings pitched so far. Both righties and lefties are hitting him hard, although the righties are hitting him actually a lot harder than the lefties are. I think the only guys that I'm really looking at on the Yankees, you got a guy like Beltran, 360, 237, so he's probably my favorite bat. You got a guy like A-Rod, although, he's somebody that you either like or you don't. Obviously, the numbers look pretty good. He has not been half as good this year as been in the past, so there's always that. And then maybe a guy like Starlin Castro or Didi Gregorius. But those would be the other guys that I would take a look at here. Rodriguez has been pretty bad, but the Yankees team is bad against left-handed pitching too. I do think they put up a couple runs here, but I'm not really back up the Yankees. If you're going to do it, maybe in a tournament or so. But again, there's just not a lot of bats on this team that I really like. Next game is New York Mets at the Philadelphia Phillies. Bartolo Colon pitching for the Mets, and he's really only had 1 bad start in his last 10 games. The other 9, he's all gone 6 or 7 innings, given up 3 runs or less, kind of limited the hits, got a couple strikeouts. There's not a lot of guys on Philly I'm looking at. Odubel Herrera, probably the best bat, 355 WOBA for him. Does have a little bit of home run upside, has a little bit of stolen base upside. So I think Odubel's probably the best bat. You can look at a guy like Maikel Franco, maybe too, 353 WOBA, 216 ISO, does have some power, hits in the middle of the order. But outside of that, I don't really see anything that I really want to take. And like I said, Cologne has been pretty solid lately. The other side of this game, you got Jeremy Hellickson pitching. He's actually been having one of his better seasons in the majors. Left-handed bats hitting 260, right-handed bats hitting 240. So he's okay in the middle there. Cespedes is somebody I definitely want to have some exposure to. 379 WOBA, 264 ISO, and righty-on-righty matchups. And he's 5 of 12 lifetime against Hellickson with 2 home runs. Getting a park bump, switching over to Philly here. I really like Cespedes tonight. I definitely think he's somebody I'm going to have some exposure to. His teammate Granderson, 371 WOBA, 226 ISO, another guy to look at. Like I said, this Mets offense has been struggling lately, so I don't really want to have a lot of these bats, but if Cespedes is okay and he's back in the lineup, he's definitely one I want to have exposure to. Next game, we talk about Pittsburgh at Washington. Steven Strasburg's on the mound. The guy's 12-0, 2.62 ERA, 1.01 WHIP, 132 strikeouts in 106 innings. I'm not taking bats against him. If you're going to take anybody, McCutchen is still a little bit cheap, especially on DraftKings, like 3,900. But again, for 3,900 in a matchup with Strasburg, definitely not somebody that I want to have a lot of exposure to, maybe only for a tournament. And Strasburg, definitely a pitcher that I wouldn't mind having some exposure to, so I could see having some of him. On the other side of this game, we got Francisco Liriano, and he's kind of sucked in 2016. 92 innings pitched, 92 hits allowed, 58 base on balls, and 59 runs. So these are not normal Liriano numbers, but they are numbers that mean that, he's a guy that I think we should be targeting against. You got a guy like Jason Worth, 403 WOBA, 278 ISO score against left-handed pitching. He's going to be hitting the 2 spot there. Absolutely love him. Love Harper, who hits well even in lefty on lefty matchups. 397 WOBA, 238 ISO. You can look at a guy like Ryan Zimmerman. He's always hit left-handed pitching well. Guy like Anthony Rendon also hits lefties well. Rendon doesn't have a lot of power. Zimmerman's actually been a little bit cold this year, but like I said, Liriano has been not bad. I think you can stack up some of these Washington bats, and I think that they're going to put up excuse me, I think they're going to put up a good amount of runs here against Liriano. Next game we talk about Baltimore at Tampa Bay. Chris Archer on the mound for Tampa Bay. He's allowed about a 250 batting average to both lefties and righties. He has a lot of strikeouts. He also has a lot of walks. He's also given up a decent amount of home runs, about a home run every sixth inning. He's a guy that's prone to blow-ups, and he likes to live dangerously. And what I mean by that is, the other day was a perfect example. I think we talked about it with his last start. Walked the bases loaded and then struck out the sides. I mean, that's the kind of thing you deal with, the roller coaster ride you get with Archer. He has the ability to strike out just about anybody that he faces. He has the ability to put teams on their heels and really put up some great starts. And he also has the ability to walk the bases loaded and give up a grand slam pretty easily with, his pitcher profile. So there are games that he looks great and scores 30 fantasy points for you. There are games that he looks horrendous and, gets you a -10. So he's very Jekyll and Hyde. He is a lot better at home. So I think this is a pretty solid matchup. And, Baltimore is a team that can strike out a little bit. But Baltimore is also a team that can and has tagged him for some runs in the past. You look at a guy like Chris Davis, 393 WOBA, 319 ISO against right-handed pitching, 5 of 17 lifetime with 2 home runs against Archer. So I think he's in a good spot. Manny Machado, 385 WOBA, 240 ISO, 9 of 25 lifetime with a home run. He's another guy in a good spot. And then Jonathan Scope, 374 WOBA, 232 ISO, 4 of 9 lifetime and a home run. So those 3 guys up there towards the top of that order for Baltimore, I think, are all in really good spots here against Archer. On the other side of the game, we got Yovani Gallardo, and he's been hit hard by both lefties and righties, huge home run allowed numbers. He's somebody I would love to target, but Tampa Bay is not really a team you want to target against right-handed pitching. But I do think that Tampa Bay is a team that has some home run power. So if I'm looking to use some guys, that's probably what I'm looking for. Corey Dickerson actually stands out, and he's not a guy that I play a lot, but 354 WOBA, huge 270 ISO score against left-handed pitching since the start of 2015. And he's 4 of 6 lifetime against Yovani Gallardo with a home run already. The only other guy I'm really taking a peek at is Logan Forsythe at second base, 4 of 13 lifetime against Yovani Gallardo. So I think he's another guy that could be in play. Next game we're going to look at is Kansas City at Detroit. Justin Verlander on the mound. Been solid this year. 4.07 ERA is a little bit high, but the 1.13 WHIP kind of shows that he's pitching a little bit better than his ERA. He also has 120 strikeouts in 117 innings and has definitely been better this year than he has been in years past. Now, just like in years past, though, right-handed bats actually have a higher average against them than left-handed bats do. Looking at this KC team right now, there's not really anybody that I love. I think Sal Perez is a decent option if you want to roll him out there. The other guy that I kind of like, Kendrys Morales at first base more than I like Eric Hosmer here. Morales has a 356 WOBA, 223 ISO score against right-handed pitching. And he's actually 12 of 36 lifetime with 2 home runs against Verlander. So he has much better numbers in his at-bats against Verlander than Eric Hosmer does. So if I'm looking to take one of them, it's probably Morales today. On the other side of this game, we got Ian Kennedy. Now, Kennedy did just throw a gem with 10 strikeouts in his last game. As a matter of fact, he has 2 games with 10-plus strikeouts in his last 3 games, which is something that he can do. He can get you some strikeouts every now and then. He also has a high fly ball number and a high home run allowed number, though, which is what kind of scares me against this Detroit team. You got guys like Miggy, 404 WOBA, 214 ISO, righty on righty matchups, 4 of 10 lifetime against Kennedy. Ian Kinsler is 6 of 9 against Kennedy with 4 doubles. Cameron Maben is 5 of 17. V-Mart is 3 of 9. Even Upton is 3 of 11 with 3 walks. So you're getting a lot of guys who have pretty good numbers against Kennedy. If the game was at Kansas City, I might feel a little better about Kennedy. But in Detroit, I actually kind of like, these Detroit bats a little more. The next game we want to look at, we got Milwaukee at Cincinnati. Anthony DeScalfani. He's actually probably the best pitcher on the Reds right now. So Milwaukee has struggled a little bit with right-handed bats. right-handed pitching, I don't think this is a horrible spot for DeSclafani. Maybe you can look at a guy like Jonathan Villar, maybe a guy like Scooter Gannett. Ryan Braun probably has the best numbers, 354 WOBA, 201 ISO. But there's not a lot in this Milwaukee team that you really like bats-wise. On the other side, though, we got Matt Garza pitching for Milwaukee. Left-handed bats have been better against them, but right-handed bats have been pretty good against them too. Very high home run rate to both sides of the plate. Joey Votto, 409 WOBA, 227 ISO. Really like him. Adam Duvall, 352 WOBA, huge 320 ISO. I love Duvall today. I think he does take Garza yard. Very good hitter's ballpark here in Cincinnati. And, Duvall's been a guy that's been, just white hot. Jay Bruce, I like too. The numbers aren't all that great. Does have a pretty nice ISO score at 254. WOBA only 333. But again, he's another guy that hits weak right-handed pitching pretty well. So I think that one or two of those three in the middle of the lineup there, those big bats for Cincinnati, are going to do some damage and probably go yard today against Garza. Next game we can talk about, we got the Rockies visiting the Braves, Colorado at Atlanta. Jorge De La Rosa on the mound, and this is kind of interesting. I mean, he's been better on the road, so that puts him in a good spot. He's been bad this year, but Atlanta has been even worse against left-handed pitching, so that puts him in a good spot. And there really aren't a lot of guys in Atlanta that profile well against them. I mean, I guess Freddie Freeman is still the best bat, lefty on lefty. You can look at a guy like Jeff Francoeur if you really want to, maybe like a Tyler Flowers. But again, none of these names are really instilling a lot of confidence in me that they're going to, Atlanta's going to put up some big numbers. So De La Rosa is actually not in a horrible spot today. On the other side of this game, Lucas Harrell, somebody that a lot of people are talking about, has 2 starts so far in 2016, and he's looked great. But this isn't like a 24-year-old kid popping up here. This is a 31-year-old journeyman who's been in the league for a while, and he's never really been this good. Right-handed bats actually have a higher average against them in the last couple of years, so he's a reverse splits guy. I don't think he's going to keep this up here. I think Colorado can put up some numbers against him. Like I said, with the right-handed bats being better, I love Nolan Arenado today. I think he's a great play. 383 WOBA, 306 ISO. On DraftKings, he's only $4,100. That's an absolute steal. So Nolan Arenado, definitely somebody I'm going to have a lot of cash game exposure to and probably a lot of tournament exposure as well because, Harold does profile as somebody who struggles in righty-on-righty matchups, and Nolan Arenado is somebody who crushes in righty-on-righty matchups. I guess you can look at Cargo and Blackman as well. Again, it's a huge park downgrade for him, but they're also getting a huge price downgrade. So I think both of these guys are worth the look. Like I said, I do like Arenado better, but I mean, Cargo and Blackman, I'm not going to argue if you put them in your lineup. The next game we can talk about, we got Cleveland at Minnesota. Carlos Carrasco on the mound. I like Carrasco a lot. I mean, in the last 3 years, he's allowed about a 220 batting average to both lefties and righties. His high K rate, he does walk a few guys every now and then, but he also has a very high ground ball rate, low home run rate, just a really, really good pitcher. Minnesota has a lot of right-handed bats here, which I don't think is going to be good for them because Carrasco is pretty tough on the right-handers. The two guys that I might look at on Minnesota, Miguel Sano hits very well in righty-on-righty matchups. 367 WOBA, 241 ISO. Had a tough start to this year, so he's been pretty hot to even get those numbers back up to that level. Definitely like Miguel Sano a little bit, but like I said, I'm not really trying to pick on Carrasco today. If I was, the other guy I'd look at is probably Eduardo Nunez, about a 350 WOBA for him leading off. He's been pretty hot. He's been putting up good numbers this year, so he's at least worth mentioning. The next, on the other side of this game, you got Irving Santana, and he's been occasionally good, and I think he's been good more than bad in his last couple starts, so people are kind of hyping him up. But, I mean, he's been mostly bad this season. Right-handed bats are really hitting him hard this year. Normally, he's a guy that left-handed bats hit harder. I'm not sure why the righties are hitting him harder this year. But, I do think that it's something to look at. A guy like Mike Napoli has actually done really well against him. So, like I said, righty on righty is kind of where Santana's been struggling. Napoli not normally a guy I look at in righty on righty matchups, but he is 8 of 22 with 4 doubles and 3 home runs against Irving Santana. So there is something to the fact that Santana's been getting lit up by right-handers. If you look at guys like Napoli's numbers against them, really the only other guy I'd kind of look at here is maybe Francisco Lindor, and even then it's kind of more of a flyer. I don't really think I want to pay up for him. The next game we can look at, we got Miami against St. Louis. You got Jaime Garcia on the mound, and he's been pretty solid. He's actually a reverse splits lefty, which is something you don't see very often, meaning that left-handed bats do have a higher average against them than the righties do. Now, with that being said, the two bats that I do want on Miami are both right-handed bats. You got Stanton, 427 WOBA, 439 ISO, 2 for 4 lifetime with the home run against Jaime Garcia. And then Marcell Ozuna, 428 WOBA, 261 ISO. I mean, these two guys have just absolutely crushed any left-handed pitching that you put on the mound against them. So for me, they're still number 1 and number 2 of guys that I want to take if I'm taking anybody to go up against Jaime Garcia. Like I said, he is a reverse splits guy, so the lefties do a little better. If you want to try to sneak a Dietrich or a Bohr or, a Yelich in there, I'm not going to argue against it. But, the right-handed power bats are probably the two guys that you definitely want to have a little bit of exposure to if you're going to take anybody in this game. The other side of this game, again, another team, St. Louis, does not hit left-handed pitching all that well. Wei-Yin Chen is on the mound. He's tough on lefties. Right-handed bats, definitely the higher average, more home runs, about a home run every 5 innings against them. So I think Stephen Piscotty becomes somebody that you want to look at. 421 WOBA, 221 ISO. Maybe you get guys like a Greg Garcia leading off with, Carpenter on the shelf now. I don't really know how the lineup's going to look. They got a bunch of right-handed bats, guys like Holiday they can throw up there. He's actually okay in righty-lefty situations. Gearchuk is actually better in righty on righty. Yadier Molina, not a bad play. There's just, outside of Piscotty, there's not a lot of upside plays. The next game we talk about, the LA Dodgers going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Bud Norris on the mound again for the Dodgers. And, he's had 7 straight good starts. Left-handed bats do hit him a little bit better. Somebody was talking the other day about how he's kind of changed the way that he's been attacking left-handed bats, which has made him a little bit tougher, using this changeup that he has more. And, the turnaround that he's had over the last couple games, it seems legit, guys. I'm not going to argue with you. If you look at the numbers, they do seem like they could be sustainable. So I definitely think he's somebody that's worth a look. Taking bats against them, you got Jake Lamb, 368 WOBA, 221 ISO, probably the best play to go up against them. Goldie's a guy that's always in play. Very good hitters park in Arizona, 396 WOBA, 236 ISO score. Maybe you can look at another lefty, like a guy like Chris Herman or Michael Bourne if they get into the lineup up there towards the top. But honestly, like I said, Norris has been pretty good. He's a guy that I used to stack against all the time, but I don't know if I'm going to be stacking against him here. On the other side of this game, though, we got Patrick Corbin, the lefty. Right-handed bats, much higher average, a lot more home runs against them. I want to really stack up guys on this Dodgers team, but they don't really have a ton of guys that I love against left-handed pitching. Guys like Trace Thompson and Scott Van Slyke are two guys who just absolutely crush lefties. Those are two guys that I think I'd want to look at, both with like 350 plus WOBAs. Trace has a big ISO score, like 252. Van Slyke, a guy who we've seen hit a lot of home runs against left-handed pitching. So even though he's had a little bit of a slow start since coming back from injury, definitely think he's somebody else to look at. Like we said, Grandal hit the home runs last time. I think he put up like 50-something fantasy points in his last game. It's just an absolute beast. I don't really expect a repeat of that, but I do expect him to do well against the lefty. Yasiel Puig is back. Justin Turner, Turner's actually better in righty on righty spots, but I like both of those right-handed backs. Both of those right-handed bats. They're getting a park bump into a good hitter's park in Arizona. So, like I said, this Dodgers team is definitely a team I want to have some exposure to today. Next game, we talk about Chicago White Sox at the LA Angels. Miguel Gonzalez, I don't really like Miguel Gonzalez, but I don't like the Los Angeles Angels offense even more. Other than Mike Trout, there's really nobody I'm looking at to use here. Trout's a 415 WOBA, 281 ISO score since the beginning of last season. He's just one of the best hitters in all of baseball, period. Miguel Gonzalez, not a very good pitcher. If you want to take guys that are, either batting up in front of Trout or behind Trout, because pretty much most of the damage that gets done on that team is done in that part of the order. On the other side of this game, Hector Santiago, the lefty's on the mound. Right-handed bats better against him, and they have a huge home run percentage. So the two guys that really stand out to me right away are going to be Abreu and Frazier. I haven't played Frazier much this year at all, but he does have a lot of home run power, huge ISO score versus left-handed pitching. Abreu is actually better in righty on righty spots, but again, a big right-handed bat going up against a left-handed pitcher. I can't really argue with that. And then Tim Anderson, the shortstop, is a right-handed bat who's going to be leading off. He's been pretty good since he's been moved up into that leadoff spot. So he would be the only other guy I'd really look at against Santiago besides those right-handed power bats. Next game, we talk about Toronto at Oakland. Daniel Magden's actually been pretty good. He's starting to get figured out in his last couple starts, though. He's been left-handed bats have a higher average. He's been much tougher on right-handed bats. His last couple starts, though, he has got knocked around for a couple runs. If you're looking for lefties to take against him, you don't got a lot on Toronto. Michael Saunders probably the best left-handed bat that they have. Ezekiel Carrera pretty much the only other one. He's been leading off for them lately. So those would be the two left-handed bats that really profile well against Mangden. The rest of these righties, again, these righties have always hit right-handed pitching well, but just profile-wise, Mangden's been tougher on the right-handed bats. So, guys like Donaldson, guys like Encarnacion and Martin and, Travis and everybody else on this team, they're not really in a good spot here. That's not to say that I don't think they put up a couple runs against Mangden. I don't think I'd use him, but I also don't think it's the easiest spot or the softest spot for Toronto bats. The other side of this game, we got Marcus Stroman up there. High batting average to left-handed bats lately. He does have a huge ground ball rate. Doesn't really give up on the home runs. Pretty much keeps the ball in the park. I think a guy like Josh Reddick is in a good spot. Left-handed bat, 364 WOBA, 186 ISO. Stephen Vogt, if you want to go down to him too, 345 WOBA, 193 ISO. Even the righty guys like even the righty guys like Danny Valencia and Chris Davis, both pretty solid against right-handed pitching. So I think those would be the guys that I'm looking at if I'm looking at anybody else. We got 2 games left. We got Houston going up to Seattle to visit the Mariners. James Paxton on the mound at home for Seattle. He really hasn't been all that good this year. Left-handed bats are hitting him. Right-handed bats are crushing him. The top of that Houston order does very well against left-handed pitching. You got Altuve with a 409 WOBA, 400 WOBA last year, 400 batting average the year before against left-handed pitching. So this guy has always hit lefties well. Springer, 401 WOBA, 248 ISO, has been crushing lefties as well this year. Really, really good against left-handed pitching. Correa is solid against lefties. He's probably the worst of the 3 of them and probably the one that I would be willing to leave off if I wasn't going to use all 3 of them. He's still solid, has a 200-plus ISO against left-handed pitching, but the other 2 I feel like hit left-handed pitching a lot better in Altuve and Springer. But I have no problem using all 3 of them. I think when you want to use any of these guys, you want to put them all together. They're all towards the top of the order there, and they all tend to produce, against left-handed pitching. The other side of this game, we got Doug Fister, and left-handed batters is the way you want to go up against him. So love Cano, 379 WOBA, 221 ISO. Love Seager, 362 WOBA, 215 ISO. He's been swinging a hot bat lately and raising those numbers. Speaking of hot bats, Seth Smith, 353 WOBA, 196 ISO. Smith may get subbed out later on in the game if a lefty comes in. But at the same point in time, this is a guy that's been smashing home runs and getting on base in front of the big bats like Cano and Seager and Cruz. Again, I do think that, Fister is a pitcher that they can get to. They should be able to put up a couple runs. Definitely want left-handed bats anytime you're going up against Doug Fister. Last game here, we got Andrew Cashner. Left-handed bats, much higher average and more home runs against them. Guys like Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, I think are both in play. 372 WOBA, 199 ISO for Belt, 340, 207 for, for Crawford. Posey, even in righty-on-righty matchups, 352, 147. Somebody else I think you can consider. Just not a big fan of Cashner. He got lit up his last start. I think he can get lit up in this start as well. So I have no problem taking San Francisco bats against them. On the other side of this game, you got Bumgarner for San Francisco. San Diego does hit left-handed pitching better, but Bumgarner's been good versus them. The only 2 guys I'd be a little bit weary of are Matt Kemp and Will Myers, but honestly, Bumgarner's been really good against this team over the years. Like I said, Kemp and Myers would be the 2 that I would look at. I'm not really looking to take them, though. I do think I will have some shares of Bumgarner here. Probably not a ton. I feel like he's a tad pricey, but again, he's been raising his strikeouts this year, and he's been an absolute stud, so can't really see a reason to argue against it. And that wraps it up for our Benny's Bats edition here at rotocurve.com. Like I said, 14 games here to welcome you guys back to MLB DFS. So make sure you get some lineups in tonight and, hopefully win some money. So thank you for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.